Man, that looks so good. Delicious. Awesome. Cool. Well, hey, before we dive in, what I would like to know is why you showed up today. I just need to know some reasons on why you felt like it was a valuable time to spend an hour out of your day to come to this. Sherry?
You guys are freaking panicking us with all this shit. Sorry. Sorry. That was recorded.
That was recorded.
Well, Amber said it.
Okay, so you want to prepare. That's what I hear. That's awesome. Great.
I want to refocus.
Refocus.
Yeah.
Yep. Is it crazy that we're halfway through the year? Like, geez, it's flying by, right? Yeah, I think it's important to, when you set your goals initially for the year, there's got to be some sort of check-in and also recalibration, right? Because things change, and you can't really predict how the market's going to be 6 months from now or 2 weeks from now here in Utah. So it's great to have that recalibration time. Awesome. Why else? Let's get 1 or 2 more.
Teach others, I have to learn it myself.
So true. Yep. Mastery is not going through the course once, right? So true. Bart, and then Amy.
Zig Ziglar, that's really shown me. He was a motivational speaker in the 1800s. Said, how can you hit a target you do not have?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No matter how many times I try and do this, I always lose the paperwork. So I put it in my phone, and then I can't open it, and I have to go to my son and ask him to open it. Anyway, it's a lot.
Yep.
So yes, I'm here to refocus and to have 6-month goals.
Cool. Awesome.
And because if Angie's here, I need to be here.
Right? Well, I think it's all of us that are like, stretch.
Yes. Cool. Well, I like that. I appreciate that. And we will get into some of the nitty gritty of goal setting at a high level. And the reality is that many people have big goals and zero plan, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of go through my thought process when it comes to a GPS 411, what those are, how they can be useful. Beforehand, I actually want to go a little bit higher level and go into some things that I think is more of the foundation that you have to have in place. And I'll actually share this shot first. So if we look at this, most people focus on the result that they want, right? So they'll focus on, this is the income that I need at the end of the year to either survive or thrive, right? And that is the whole end goal or end game that they're focusing on. Now, the challenge is that there's actually some other pieces of the puzzle that are below the surface, right? That you're not seeing. And that's where we actually have to realize that your profit at the end of the year is just a lag measure. Okay. Has anybody read the 4DX, 4 Disciplines of Execution? Okay. So in that book, it talks about how there's something called lead measures and lag measures. Okay. Now, a lead measure would be the items that lead to a specific result. Okay. The lag measure would be what the result is. So for example, when I step on the scale to weigh myself, that is going to be a lag measure. It's a result. If I look in my bank account, it's going to be a lag measure of what? My spending habits and how much money I make, right? And so it's just a result, but it's not the actual lead or causation. And so we have to look at, well, what causes the result? Does that make sense? And so before we actually get to the GPS and the 411, there's actually an intentional process we have to go through, which is getting clear behind the why and the purpose, right? And then also, you may have heard the saying that not all priorities are created equal. That's the reality. Too often, how many of us have used a to-do list in the past? And how many of you have actually accomplished everything on your to-do list and kept it that way, right? It's always expanding, continually growing.
And even if you did that painful statement, you said all priorities aren't created equal.
Yes.
Congratulations. I was able to push out those light bulbs too.
Yep, totally. And that's the perspective is can you get clear about what is the highest dollar per hour activity that you can do at all times, right? With your skill sets, with your abilities. And you have to be able to, on a weekly basis, look at your action items that you're going to attack and be able to determine which priorities are actually have the biggest impact on your business and your life, right? So we'll go through that process. But I just want you to understand for this first 15, 20 minutes, we're going to go pretty deep on the purpose and the priority because those actually have the highest impact on your productivity and your profit, okay? Profit is only 10% of the equation. Again, it's the lead measure. But what has the most impact on your goals for this year and beyond is the purpose and the priority, how well you do at focusing on your one thing, okay? So I'm going to share a quick video.
We build habits, rituals, and disciplines that serve us, okay? The reason my standards are set so high is because I don't want to leave it up to my own devices. My standard is one more minute on the treadmill. My standard is one more person I can reach that day, one more phone call, one more something. And so for me, I raise them every single year, but the way I get to do it is I link it to my reasons. And so goals are really empty to me. You show me someone with compelling, emotional, gigantic reasons, I'll show you someone who's changing their standards all day long. So give you one quick version that you've not heard before. One of the reasons I'm relatively fit is not just peak state. I have an uncle in my family that died at 50 years old of a heart attack. He's my godfather, my dad's only brother. I kind of resembled him. And I look like him a lot. So on the way back from his funeral, my reticular activator's on heart attacks. On the TV screen on the airplane, I'm listening to music, is the Oprah Winfrey show. She's going through a new heart scan. I've unplugged my headphones, plug it into the airplane one. They're talking about this new scan at Cedars-Sinai that at that time was new. It could read the plaques in your arteries, the calcifications, without going, really invasively. I scheduled it. I went in. I had a world-class doctor who understood reasons and leverage instead of just prescribing. Because when we coach people, you need to do this, you need to do this. Doctors do it. Take this pill, take this. He understood leverage and reasons. And when I walk in, I sit down, the doctor comes out and he says, "Oh my, I can't believe these arteries are in that young body." Got my attention. We walk back in, we sit down. He could still go, "You need Crestor, eat clean, get out of here." Isn't that what an average doctor does, right? No, wired me with huge reasons. He goes, "Let me ask you a question. I heard your wife's pregnant. I said, "Yeah, I have a son." And he says, "Do you want to be there when he graduates from high school to be there for that day?" I said, "Yes, sir, yeah." He goes, "Your wife's pregnant. What do you have?" And I said, "A daughter. Would you like to walk her down the aisle on her wedding day, or are you okay that it's some other man?" I went, "What the fuck is on this scan?" Right? And he goes, "I want to be very clear with you. If you keep going down the road you're going, there'll be some other man with your son at graduation high school, and a stranger's walking your daughter down the aisle that's not even born yet on her wedding day. But if you do exactly what I tell you to do, you'll be there." And so to this day, brother, there are mornings when I wake up, not every morning, I don't want to go to the gym. I go, "Bella's wedding, Bella's wedding, Bella's wedding." So my standards are high because of my big old reasons. Other dudes may miss the gym that day because they're not going to miss their daughter's wedding if they don't go. But I've convinced myself I'll miss my daughter's wedding. So I will get my ass out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and I will get to that gym because my reasons are bigger, so my standards are higher. So that's what I think causes us to have great standards, is huge reasons.
So question to ask yourself is, how big are your reasons? That's really the starting place for all of this. And it's about getting clear about what's most important to you and why you are doing what you're doing, right? And this is really the starting place to not only achieving more in life, but also having more fulfillment on the back end. Because there's the reality that you can set a goal to climb a mountain and still get to the top and not be completely satisfied. Whether it's a certain dollar figure that you're trying to earn, whether it's a certain amount of transactions you're trying to sell, you can get to that space and still say, well, what's next? There's always an expansion of desire for wanting more. And so you have to get clear about what the reason is to make sure that that fulfillment actually is tied to not only the success, but also the lack of, right? And so that's the first part. I'm going to skip this video for time. We may come back to it. But I think that the most important factor And first off, let me just go ahead and check in. What did you catch, or what stood out to you in that quick clip with Ed Milet?
Actually had, it wasn't his. For other people that we will for
I'm gonna put this on.
His why wasn't actually his. It was somebody else's. It was his daughter. I mean, at the end of the day, and we'll do way more for other people than we typically even do for ourselves.
To highlight that, Angie, how many of us have had some sort of appointment with somebody else on our calendar, and we do whatever it takes to make sure that we meet that meeting, right? Now, do any of you put anything on your schedule for Saturdays with yourself, an appointment with yourself, essentially, whether it's planning, goal setting, right, organizing the house, whatever it is, and also not treat that with the same intensity of like, I've got to meet this person at this place at this time, right? And so I think that highlights the factor that the reality is when you have an external force and you bring other people into your desires, you actually see a heightened sense of accountability. It actually helps to hold you accountable when you bring external people or reasons into your vision, your goals, right? But when it is just about you, you won't always follow through. And so try to find reasons that are outside of yourself, whether that is your kids, whether that is your spouse, whether that is an impact you want to have in your community or on a grander scale. And here's the reality is that this can be such an individual experience. It doesn't have to, there's some people who want to change the world. It doesn't have to be that. It literally can be that you want to make sure that your kids or your grandkids have the right philosophy and outlook and way of showing up for the world. Right? So it can be very simple and be individual. I actually am going to play this video because I think it's important. I'll share a personal story and then we'll get into some of the 411 process.
I am what child hunger looks like in America. I am a 9-year-old boy who hopes a friend invites me to a sleepover so I can have dinner. I am a 15-year-old girl who goes for walks during lunch so my friends won't know I don't have anything to eat. I am a 13-year-old boy who gets into fights at school just because I'm hungry. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 7 American children who struggle with hunger. Kids you pass by every day but never knew they were hungry.
Who was at Mega Camp last year? We hosted it here. One, Amber, cool. So I kind of shared, this is something for me that's been a driver for the past about 7 years. And it comes from my personal experience growing up. And there were times where because of my parents' choices and some of their upbringing and their childhood, my younger brothers, I have 2 younger brothers, and there was times where we were hungry. And there was 2 specific instances where we were homeless. And fast forward, and I won't go too deep in that story, but fast forward when I'm 20 years old, I have a mentor, an individual, and I was that kid who was a troublemaker in high school and in middle school and in elementary, because a lot of things that were going on at home. And I realized now, looking back, how I was very misunderstood by a lot of the teachers and the people that I interacted with on a day-to-day basis, because I was labeled as a troublemaker, but also they didn't understand why. And I had a mentor at 20 who understood the kind of background that I'd grown up from. And instead of, he would always say this quote, and he would say, if you treat him, and I didn't understand it at that time, but it's a seed that he planted and it's grown to this day. But he would say, if you treat a man as he is, he will remain that way. If you treat a man as he could be and ought to be, he will become who he could be and ought to be. And he would say that over and over and over again. And I didn't realize that he was actually practicing that, like actually doing that with me. And what he did was help me to understand a lot of the concepts that just were not present in my upbringing, right? And one of those was financial literacy. Like he is the one that completely changed my paradigm around what's possible from a financial income perspective. And this individual, Steve Peterson, I can say has not only radically changed my life, but he's changed the trajectory of my posterity. I'm super aware of that. And so what I've realized is, for me, this is a cause that I am committed to. And I'll share one example of how, when you, again, have very clear purpose, a lot of clarity around your purpose, this helps you to go further. So 2013, I ended up getting into door-to-door sales. And initially this was in the security space. And then in 2015, I ended up getting into DirecTV / AT&T services. And every year we would throw a sales competition. And that competition was basically a March Madness style. So we'd have a bracket. We'd start with 120 to 200 people in that bracket, 200 sales individuals. And what would happen is, at each level, each competition, which would last usually 2 days, the losers would be cut out of the competition. And so it would cut off by half every single segment. And so you would finally get to the top 2 individuals. And so for 2016 through 2018, I was in that top 2 bracket. But 2016, my first year in that bracket, I ended up getting to competition, the last 2, which was myself and Mike Taylor, who's a great friend of mine. And he had set the record going against me for the most DirecTV sales sold in a week, which was 34 for our organization. And I had the day leading up to going to battle Mike, I sold 10 transactions, or 10 DirecTV services that day. And I had beat my body by taking a 5-hour drinking energy drink, not actually treating my body in a great way. Didn't stop for a break because I was like, I was determined to win. That next day I woke up, which was again the first day against Mike, and my body was feeling it. Like I was not in a healthy place. And so I was like, I'm going to go out later. I've got to sleep in and rest. And I'd woke up in the afternoon, and Mike had already had like 8 sales. And I was like, in my mentality, I was like, I'm done. Like there's no chance for me to come back and beat him. And so he ended up beating me that year. The following year, 2017, something happened. I had some friends, people who were on my team, approach, and basically in conversation, I can hear that they were under the belief that Mike was going to put me in the dirt again this year in the sales competition. And I took that very seriously. And also I was kind of offended, because I was like, man, well, these people are on my team and they don't believe that I can beat Mike Taylor. And so what I did was, leading up to that week, which they changed the game, this was going to be an entire week-long event for this competition. And so what I did is I actually wrote down, I wish I would have brought the journal with me, but I, in my journal, wrote down 26 ways to beat Mike is what I wrote down. And I literally thought of everything I could do. I was like, what would I eat for lunch? What would my morning routine look like? What book am I going to read? What music am I going to listen to? Like I literally detailed everything line by line of what I would do to beat him. And my goal was I was going to beat his record. So I said, I'm going to beat Mike and I'm going to hit 35. Now I was in a coaching program at this time called Epic Impact. And it was kind of a life coaching / business combination, a group out of San Francisco. And I was talking to my coach before going into this week. And he said, what if the goal wasn't to beat Mike, but what if it was to play like your, to your full potential? And I don't think I really grasped it in that moment, because I didn't change my actual number goal, but I did cross off at the top. It's not the beat Mike plan. It's the, beat my best week plan for Shoney, right? But here's what happened. First day of the competition, and here's what my coach challenged me to do, was to determine and clarify what my reason was, what my purpose was. And so going into that week, what I did is I actually decided that I was going to donate every dollar that I earned that week towards a charity, which was feeding kids. And I'm so grateful that I had a coach in that moment because he helped me to gain this clarity. And what he challenged me to do was to go through a process every day when I was on the doors. And what I would do is I would knock, and I started about 8:30 in the morning, and then I would finish up around 9, 10 o'clock at night. So I was knocking through dark. And every time that, by like 3, 4 o'clock, I felt my energy was depleting and I was not fully, excited about going door to door anymore, I would start to think I could either go home, I can call it a day, I've made a great amount of income, or I could think about little kids following me from door to door. And every time I made another sell, I could turn around and give them food. And if I wanted to quit and go home early, I would have to tell them, I'm sorry. And this is obviously just a visualization process I did, or an idea, is I would have to tell them, you know what, I'm tired, I'm going to go home. Like, I'm sorry, I don't have any more food for you guys. And the reason why I share this is because what ended up taking place is day 1, I sold 10, day 2, I sold 10, day 3, I sold 9, day 4, I sold 10. I ended up with 54 transactions or clients sold that week, and almost doubled the previous company record. And what I realized up front is if I would have set my goals higher from the get-go, like 60 could have been a reality, 70 could have been a reality. And it all determines, it's all tied back into what is your purpose? What is the reason? Because that will drive you further than you think is possible. And so again, I know we've spent a lot of time on that part, but it's so important for you to get clarity around what's the purpose. And one book that can help with that is called Vivid Vision. And that can help you get clear about what is important to you. Because we're not all created equal. We all have different experiences, different life upbringings. And so what is meaningful to you is going to be very different than the person next to you. So you have to go on that own process of yourself, finding out what is your impact. And I promise it's going to pull you far further than you think is possible. So with KW, we have it spelt out this way. And Gary Keller has a really good way of taking you through this process, which is when you get clear about what's important to you, you actually want to go layers deep. You want to ask yourself, well, why is that important to me? And then when you come up with your answer, ask yourself, well, why is that important to me? And what's going to happen is it's going to funnel up to your big why. And for Gary Keller, it was to live at his best. At this point in time, could he stop working if he wanted to? Yes. Could Warren Buffett stop working if he wanted to? Yes. Why do those people keep going at that level? You ever thought about that? Fulfillment.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have this journal. It's like, so I have this journal. You guys should look into it. It's called Project 369. So it's all about like using your mind to attract, what you want out of life. And so one of the exercises it has you do is you read like the first part of the book, and it kind of teaches you about those principles. And then it makes you write down 9 items. 3 are short term, like in the next few weeks. 3 are, in the next couple of months, and then 3 are the next couple of years. And in the morning, you write down 3, afternoon 6, evening 9, just repetitively every single day over and over and over again. But one of the things I wrote down, kind of similar to, the reason I feel like Gary Keller still works, is I am financially independent and work for fulfillment and purpose, not income. Right. So I don't know, it's just a little tidbit I had.
Great perspective. Thank you, Riley. That is. Love that. So I'm going to skip a few of these. So well-defined goals are like a magnet. They pull you in the direction, and they pull you in their direction. And the better you have defined them, the better you have described them, the harder you work on them, the harder they pull. Okay. So how well have you defined what your goals and targets are? Now, this is the process. These are the tools we're going to go through. And we're going to kickstart the process of getting clarity around your GPS in your 411 today. But it's also going to be a process that you have to have on your calendar and consistently refer back to it and update it. because everything is changing on a consistent basis in your life and in your business. And so you have to be able to adapt that. Now, your someday goal, ties to your long-term vision. So if you think about, 20 years from now, 15 years from now, 30 years, 50, whatever it is, when you're in your rocking chair, you're looking back at your life and you're telling your grandkids or your great grandkids about what you've accomplished and what you've done in life. What are those things that you feel like you'll actually talk about with them? What are those things that are actually going to be important in that moment? Do you think you're actually going to tell them about the time you sold 25 houses in a year? Or that you won being in the UCAR top 250? Probably not, right? So you have to get clear about, well, what would I like the story to be? How would I like to tell them that I had a positive impact on other people? Or the charities that I gave time and effort and energy and resources to? Like, what is that story that that you want to be able to share? That's the someday vision goal. You then have the next kind of road mark that you should look at is your 3-year plan. And the reason why has anybody read the 12-week year? So they kind of talk about this. Same thing in Vivid Vision is that when you have a target that's way far out, let's say at 5, 10, 15-year goal, there's so many unknowns that are going to be a part of that process that it's actually hard to kind of put a determining factor on what the outcome is going to be. And a 3-year target is actually measurable for your mind. And so typically if we have 5 years or 10 years, our mind is just saying, hey, that's just too far out for me to really comprehend right now. But when you pull it into a 3-year, we found that that's kind of the horizon, the time horizon where you're like, I can believe that can happen in 3 years, right? And so that's where you want to take your someday goal and say, well, what would happen in the next 3 years to keep me on pace with that long-term reality that I'd like to have happen? Does that make sense so far? Any questions there? Cool. Now, from the 3-year plan, what you end up with is your GPS. And the GPS is your 1-year commitment. It's the 1-year target, the one thing that you'd like to accomplish for the year. And we'll go through exactly what a GPS is and how to use it, how to craft it. And then there's another tool called the 411. And your 411 is going to be a turn-by-turn signal or a resource that helps you to recalibrate on a weekly basis to stay on track with your annual goal. Okay. And then you have your time block schedule. So your 411 is actually what you put on your calendar. Most people put events or meetings on their calendar, but people who are ultra successful and very focused on their priorities actually put their priorities on their calendar. Like, what are the top rocks or the biggest rocks or lead dominoes that you can knock off your list this week that will end up putting you on track with your long-term goal? That's what we want clarity on. Let's skip a few of these. Okay, so this is where we're going to get into your profit and your productivity. So it all starts with having a well-defined game plan. And I'm going to give you guys an analogy, my understanding of what a GPS and a 411 do when you have clarity around those tools and when you actually implement them. So does everybody have these 2 sheets? If you don't, there are some on the back table. You'll want a copy of each. So again, you've got your someday goals, your 5 years. I again would suggest 3 years, and then your one year, 1 month, 1 week today. That's the kind of breakdown that we're going to dive into right now and how that plays out. Now, your someday goals is a process that you really have to take some time on. Like, you've got to go take some time on a Saturday or even go on a retreat, like take yourself to Park City for a weekend or something like that, and lock yourself in a hotel and go hang out by the pool or some nice scenic views, and think about what would I like to have happen. And in that time, just kind of journal whatever comes to mind on what you would like to be your reality 50 years from now, or when you're in that rocking chair, so to speak. And but from now, what we're going to do is go specifically through the GPS and the 411 tools. So your GPS, and the GPS is something that you're actually going to want to create for the different important buckets of your life. So for example, your personal life should have a different GPS than your business GPS. Okay. So personally, I have three. I have one for the market center as a whole for the business. I have one for my personal real estate business, and then I have one for my personal life. Okay. So those are the three that I have. And from there, what ends up happening is they trickle into one 411. Okay. So all of those GPSs flow down to one 411 plan. Now think about it this way. Let's just say that we're going on a road trip. Okay. And we're going to split into teams. This is team 1 over here. This is team 2 over here. Okay. Now I know that there's only 3 over there, and that's totally fine for this game, but let's just say we're going to give them the advantage. Okay. Now let's pick a place that's probably over a 15-hour drive. Name any place in the States. Seattle? How far of a drive is that? 14 hours. Let's go further than that. Let's get close to 20. New York City. Okay. Has anybody made a drive in relative length that's close to New York City? Okay. Yeah, Julie has. I actually did from Virginia Beach to Utah, and that was a far one. Would never do it again. But so let's just take this example. You guys are all driving to New York. We're driving to New York, and this is a race. Okay. First ones to get there get $100,000. Now here's how we're setting this race up. You guys can only use MapQuest. Who's used that before? Okay. You guys get to use Google Maps or iMaps or whatever's built into modern day cars. Okay. Who's going to get there first? Why?
They're going to be alerted if there's traffic jams or down roads or slow down.
Probably the fastest possible way at the current
Way better.
moment.
Yeah.
Totally.
More info.
Absolutely. And the big picture is that most people live their life kind of like on that MapQuest terrain, where they're trying to use that to get to where they want to go and their goals. Okay. And yet we have some people who use a GPS, who use a 411, who have kind of that modern day effect to accomplishing their goals, an actual game plan to getting there. And so what I want you to understand is that your GPS is really actual GPS that's built into your phone or into your car. It is something where you can program a destination and say, how can I get there in the quickest time possible? Okay. Now the 411, where that comes into place is, what did Sherry mention happens if there's a accident or if there's maybe some road work happening? What does your phone intelligently do? Recalibrates you, reroutes you, right? Actually get off this exit and go around this traffic, right? That's what your 411 actually does. Because what is different today than in January of 2022 in the real estate market? Interest rates are different. Supply is different. Everything is different, right? So should you act on the same game plan from January as the market is adapting right now? Probably not, right? It's probably not the most efficient way to still stay on track with your goals. So that's where a 411 comes into play, and you have to have it on your calendar every single week to recalibrate. So that should be a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday process where you're looking at, am I on track with my goals? What has changed around the circumstances that make my game plan or my action steps have to adapt to reroute and get back on track. Does that make sense so far? So that's the importance of the GPS and the 411 is they really go hand in hand. Your GPS is your year goal, your year plan, and then your 411 is the day-to-day, every single week, what's going to adjust, right? To get you where you want to go. So what I'm going to do is we're going to break down just this example GPS. And the starting point is you've got to get clear about what your income goal is and then how many transactions would be required for you to hit that goal. And so we do that through the process of knowing your economic model. So refer back to the MREA that can help with that. Or you can go to a website. It's called, it's CTE. If you want to write this down, it's ctelogin.com/goals. Let me pull it up really quick so you can see. This one's free. Should be free. Yep.
I just signed up for the account. CTE requires who's paying for CTE.
Oh, so you have to actually, I may have said it wrong. It's ctelogin.com/goals. Try that and let me know if it lets you in. Works? Cool. Okay, so that should work. So what happens is it will actually allow you to determine what is your financial goal for the year. And let me just play with a few numbers here. So if I were to say, hey, my goal is throw out a number. 350. What it's going to do, and then you add in what's your percentage based off of listings to buyers. And then what is your average sales price? What's the median here in Utah County? Over 500, right? And you can, again, just adapt all of these numbers and it's going to spit out. And then you can go ahead and adjust your conversion rates if you're familiar with those as well. And it will show you exactly how many appointments you need to set, how many appointments you need to hold, how many contracts signed, and how many you actually need to sell. Yes. I haven't played with them side by side, to be honest. So I'm not sure. I just like this version a little bit better. I feel like you have a little bit more control over the things you can adjust on it. So good question. It is, Kyle. Yep. Yeah. You can then actually just print this page and, have that visual. And so you can see that consistently. But this is where, again, your financial goal should flow right to the top. And how many transactions you need to sell should flow to the top of your GPS. So if you look at this example, it says, I'm going to serve 21 families in 2022 and bring home 125 net income or whatever your financial goal is. And the question then goes to, well, how? In the way a GPS, does anybody know what a GPS stands for? Goals, priorities, strategies. So you want to get clear about what is the one goal that I want to accomplish this year in my business life. Again, you would have another GPS for what is the one thing that I can accomplish in my personal life. That would be most impactful for me. And then what happens is you actually get clarity around, well, what is the top 3 priorities that I know if I focus on those would be the biggest lead measures that will end up in the lag measure of my financial goal. So where could I place my energy and know that I'm going to get the highest ROI, right? This is where we start to prioritize, okay? Yeah, I don't even know what I said. Where I could place my energy to have the highest ROI on my time, something like that. And so your priorities should be focused on, like, let's just break down number one. And these are, I put a bunch of examples on here. So then you can go and kind of take some of these, because everybody does different lead generation methods and so forth. So just use these as examples, right? And craft your own. So for example, my number one priority is to achieve my one thing for the year, which is going to be focusing on listings, because I know listings are going to make everything easier. So I'm going to get 10 listings sold. And the way that I'm going to do that is through SOI, through events, and you just name the lead gen levers that you're going to focus on, right? How? What's the method that you're going to get those listings? And then down below, you can see the specific strategies. Now they have to be actionable. They have to be something that you can actually measure as well. Okay. That would be basically a SMART goal. And so you can see that I said, hey, I want to, for one, and so we're getting into the specific strategies now that are going to support that priority. So strategy number one, create new habits of lead gen every single morning from Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. You can see all these do have next to each of them, or be. And what it comes down to is being clear about, well, what is the actions I'm going to take, or who do I need to be able to earn that certain amount of income? There's a great saying by Jim Rohn where he says that the purpose of accomplishing a goal is not the actual goal. It is who it forces you to become in the process. And so that's where I'd actually challenge you to have some of the B goals on your sheet as well, right? So who do you have to be? List 13 homes by November 15th, 2022. Is that specific? Yeah, right? Has a specific date, has an amount of listings that I want to list by that timeline. And it's broken out. And then contact how many in my database by 10 or between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. Monday through Friday. And I'm going to get 6 sold through that specific method. So you're getting very clear about what are the lead levers that you want to pull throughout the year that are going to lead towards your 1-year goal. Does that make sense? What thoughts do you have looking at this sheet so far? What catches your attention? The details and the time blocking. Is that Sherry or Bart? Raise your hand.
No, it was the same, the detail.
Yep. Yeah.
I like how you call my people. That's just so casual. The end. I'm gonna call my no time limit, no time blocking. Just let me call my people.
Because then the question, Bart, is if at the end of the year I asked you, did you call your people? It's kind of actually easy to say yes when you called 2 people, right? And so, and so I do agree. You have to have something where, and here's the other side of that coin. The question you've got to ask yourself, if you passed this game plan on to somebody else, if they ran this playbook, would they get the results that you want in your business? So that's how you can ask if it's clear enough, if it has the right lead measures, is could I pass this recipe book on to somebody, to a different chef, and have them come out with the same outcome? What does that force you to do around your priorities? Bring some clarity. Cool. I think the other way to do it is say, hey, well, I have to turn this plan in at the end of the year. My coach is going to ask me line by line, which one of these did I actually stick with? Which ones did I do? And here's the reality. Most people, again, will set goals when going into a new year. December. And then when will they look at them again? December. Did I hit them? Right? And so the 411 keeps you accountable, where you have to look at your GPS and say, am I still on track with this? And if not, make those calibrations, right? So you're essentially holding yourself accountable. You're being your own coach in this process, which I think is super important. So again, on the GPS side, these are just specific examples. And what I want to do is just give you some clarity around, I just want to like pull back the curtains, show you my GPS process, what I do on a weekly basis, and then also my calendar. And here's what I'll tell you is it's not about perfection. It's about progress. Okay. And so what I'll tell you is I actually don't do this every single week, 100% of the time throughout the year. My aim is 70%. So for me, it's the 70% rule. I know that if I achieve these things at 70%, I'm going to end up where I want to be 5 years from now. And so that's been far more helpful throughout the process is when I miss a week because I'm on vacation or whatever's happening, I don't also, get down on myself because I'm like, no, I'm still within my 70%. It's not about perfection. That's the one thing I just want to get out of the way. Does that make sense? So let me pull 2 sheets up. And first, let's just throw out I'm going to pass the mic around, throw out any ahas or questions that you like to go with while I'm pulling this up. Give me some time for a sec.
It's not about perfection, I think is a very important statement for me, maybe for other people here too. Meaning when we don't repeat that and remember that, when we lag behind, we just say, well, probably not this year. Maybe next year I'll start over. Where Shona, you said, if you're within 70% of that perfection, you feel accomplished enough that you can keep going. And I think that's huge because we all have down weeks. We all have life. We all have vacations. So, yeah.
So the one thing for me, I think that's huge on this is you have 3 sections in here, which I think is really important. I think one of the struggles that I have and my team members have is that we're running different businesses. So they might be having work that they're doing for the team, but they also may have investments or Airbnbs or other areas of their life. So it's a challenge because right now I have business and personal. And so I think our production gets hid in other business strategies or things that we're working on. So I like that this pulls them apart and actually holds each area of our life accountable. So I'm super excited about that. So having some clarity around the differences between, I guess, work and business and production around that.
Okay, so this is how I go through the process. So I will have my personal GPS and I actually do it in Google Sheets. You can obviously just have this paper printed out, but what I'll do is I will go through, and this is now we're switching to 411, sorry. So not the GPS, 411. So my GPS plan ends up rolling into my 411. Now pull out this sheet. It says the one thing. Now, what happens is your personal, professional, and money goals. I personally have money is a priority for me. So I have that extra tab. You don't have to use that if you don't want to. But what happens is your top 3 priorities, right, that you set on your GPS is what should show up at the top of this 411. So you're actually just copying the information from your GPS. Does that make sense so far? This, which is this top section here. Your next section needs to be geared towards what would have to happen this month for that to become a reality, for my long-term goals for this year to become a reality. So you're actually reverse engineering and starting to get granular about what would be the highest and best use of my time this month for the next 30 days. And ask yourself if the clock ends at the end of this month. Okay. Stop playing in the realms of 1 year. Start playing on what happens if I told you, let's just say, throw out a financial goal that you have. If you're willing to share with the group for this year. 500,000. So if I told you, Bart, okay, that if you sold, let's call it 4 homes this month, I will put $500,000 in your bank account. Are you confident you can get 4 people under contract? They don't have to close this month, but you have to put them under contract this month.
I love that visual. I mean, even though you're not going to be 500,000, if you can give it to Johnny, that'd be great. The visual of if the incentive was that high, could I do it?
Mhm.
The answer being yes, then I've got to find out my own incentive that would allow me to do whatever it took to get 4 under contract.
Yeah,
But we get caught up in the minutia
totally.
of the thick and thin thing.
Yep. Do you at least believe that it's possible to get 4 under contract this month?
I would hire Angie to do it for me.
Yep.
I believe it's possible. That's the motivation. I would think any of us, seasoned or even not, would do what it takes to get $500,000 in 30 days.
The reality is, whatever your goal is, that is how it actually plays out. Is you just have to look at your goal and say, well, what would have to happen? And this is a mind trick that I played on myself in door-to-door sales, where I would say, if I sell one direct TV service in the next 3 hours, I got granular to the hourly. And I said, if I do it in 3 hours, I've made $300,000. Now my commitment for that next 3 hours was worth $300,000. That was the focus. And so I was like, there's nothing stopping me in this 3-hour period. Right. And so when you can get clear about every small step that you take actually does lead to the big domino, right? It helps you to move forward with a better clarity around how important this 1 month does really matter. This 1 week coming up really does matter. And so what happens is your month goal then flows down to, well, what is my priority for this 1 week in that category of life? What's the one thing that would be the highest and best use of my time on a daily basis for me to focus on? And so down below, what ends up happening is on a weekly basis, again, I'll go back on Saturday and I'll say, what did I accomplish this week? And I'll cross those things off. If I feel like it's still relevant and important, I will, and I haven't accomplished it, I will pull it forward to the next week. Does that part make sense? Now, what happens is this actually, if you heard the saying that success leaves clues, right? Your own success or lack of leaves clues. So if what happens if after 3 months, you're looking at your sheet and you've noticed that you haven't crossed anything off on any of those weeks? What is it telling you? Recalibrate, right? And it's telling you, hey, I'm not actually putting in the work, right? You can actually see a track record of what you've accomplished that's led to your annual goals.
And for me, I think there's a lot of people that in this room that are like that. And when we get there again, just because we're sitting in here doesn't mean I'm going out before listening because Sean's giving me $500,000. What we need to do at the end of 3 months and we see the raw ugly, we truly have to ask ourselves
Yes.
the real why.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this look like this?
Yeah.
And does that mean that I go out and, become a rock star or a civil engineer
Yep.
or a model like Riley could do 2 jobs, but why aren't? And then
Yeah.
it happens a second, third, 3 months in a row. Lee Stern, the famous, the amazing Lee Stern, said real estate is full of incredible hiding.
Mm-hmm. What you're talking about, Bart, is so important. Is that if you look over 3 months, and what happens if you actually crossed everything off that list for 3 months and you're still not seeing the results that you want? What is that telling you about your priorities that you put on there? It might not be the right priorities to focus on, right? And so that's where this actually ends up being almost like a thermostat telling you where to spend your energy, right? Now, the last thing I'll share is how does this actually, what do you do after you've done your 411 planning for the week? What I would suggest is going into Google Calendar. Let me pull it up really quick. Mine is a little colorful. What I would do, let me look towards next week. Actually, no, we'll start with this. So let's say that, again, you have your 411. What you want to do is if you look at my different time blocks here, these are not actually appointments. These are specific success list items that I want to accomplish. So I'm actually putting time on the calendar for those things to happen. And so I'll go on and I'll say, let's see, for example, in a specific project that I have right now, it's identifying certain candidates for a role. So that ends up on my calendar. So whatever those top 411 items are for your week, they should roll into a time block. There should be an actual time allocated towards them on your calendar each week. Does that part make sense? So this is how you actually put it into action, is saying, hey, where am I going to accomplish this at what time? So either for me, it's either in the mornings or the evenings, I will put those specific time blocks of when I'm going to accomplish that specific task. Does that make sense? So we're out of time, but I just want to check in and open it up for any questions or ahas, takeaways from today's session.
Be very specific. Like, very specific.
Yes. There's a saying that vague goals produce vague results. So getting very specific. Amy.
My problem is I have a hard time with not accomplishing everything on there because I'm a very checklisty person. But then I have 2 kids who may call and say they're sick or whatever, forgot my glasses, whatever it is. And then I have to adjust my schedule. And so being flexible, I guess, the 70-30 is huge to me, I guess. And I've never looked at it like that instead of 100%, because I'm looking at your calendar and I'm like, oh my gosh, well, my daughter's going to call and say she needs this, or my husband's going to say we need this day or whatever, And so I don't know. I think that's just the biggest thing for me.
So here's the reality: is life happens, and as much as like I want you to feel like it's like, hey, you just put it on your calendar and it ends up happening. It's not the case. If I actually fast forward to next week, look at how much cleaner this looks. That's how my weeks start. And then the tornado comes in, right? The whirlwind. But here's what you have to do. You have to say, if I'm going to erase, I must replace. Meaning you have to ask yourself, when something bumps into those zones on your calendar, ask yourself, is this thing absolutely necessary for me to accomplish my 1-year goal? If it is, I'm not just deleting it, because that's what most people do. I'm just shifting it to another time and saying, hey, you know what? Later on this evening, I planned on, going golfing. Not doing that anymore. I'm actually going to do my lead generation in that time block because it's more important to me than that golf time, right? Or that Netflix time, right? So you've got to say, well, hey, if something bled into your lead generation in the morning, lead generation is not done for the day. It just moves to a different slot and you're cutting other stuff out that's not as purposeful as that most important thing. Does that make sense? How does that feel?
Better.
But life's still gonna happen.
Yeah.
Okay. And so again, that's where it's like sometimes there's an entire day that can be shot from random things that happen. And you just have to have that awareness. Again, it's not about perfection. It's not living everything to the T. It's just like, hey, if I focus on what's the most important, if I really do get clear about my priorities and I hit those at 70%, I'm going to end up in a really good place. Cool. Any other thoughts, comments or questions before we wrap up? Awesome. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'll send out templates of all this so that you can print them and use them on your own.
Did you make a copy of your spreadsheet where you have everything
Yeah.
documented?
Yep, I got that. I'll send out. Yeah. So just clarity really quick on the spreadsheet. Again, this is how I do each month. And then I can just duplicate the month and reset. But if you actually print this, it prints perfectly into an actual page. So this sheet that you guys have was printed from a spreadsheet. So cool. Okay. Have a great day.